Welcome to the lecture on translating words into expressions and equations. Today we're going to talk about how you take an English phrase or sentence and translate it into a mathematical expression or equation. Now there's four key words that you often run across that you will want to know about. The first one is sum, and that means the same thing as add or addition. Difference means subtract. Product means multiply. And quotient means divide. So the kinds of examples that you might see would be like example number 1 here, where we're going to see 8 times a number. Now when you see 8 times a number, you want to identify the various pieces of that phrase that you can translate into either numbers or variables or operations. Now we obviously know that 8 means 8, times means multiplication, and a number is going to be our variable portion of this. You could pick any letter of the alphabet that you want to represent a variable. Typically we use x for our variable. So this translates into 8 times x. In mathematics, we often would simplify this and just write it as 8x. That implied multiplication between the 8 and the x is already there, so we don't have to write it. Okay, if we look at the second example, it says a number subtracted from 14. Now usually when we read sentences from left to right, that's also how we would translate mathematically, from left to right. But here's one special case that requires us not to do that. When you see the phrase subtracted from, this is actually going to cause us to switch the order around. So for example, if we see a number, usually we think of that as x, subtracted from 14. You might think this is x minus 14, but that would be incorrect because we want to switch the order around and put the 14 first, even though it comes second in the sentence, and then subtract from that our number x. So x minus 14 is going to be incorrect. We want to take our x away from the 14. So try to remember that the phrase subtracted from requires you to switch your order around. Okay? Example 3. The quotient of a number and 12. Now quotient is one of those key words that we just talked about. It means to divide. So we want to divide a number and 12. And here we are going to go left to right. So it says a number first, so that's my x, and is going to be exactly where that division goes, and 12 comes second. So one way to write this would be x divided by 12. Now in mathematics, another way to write division is by using a big fraction. So this would be equivalent to also writing x over 12. Whatever word or number or variable comes first goes on top, and whatever comes second goes on the bottom. So both ways of writing this are correct. X divided by 12 or x over 12. Example 4. 7 less than a number. Now less than is another key word, just like subtracted from, where you have to switch the order around. So in this example, what we want to do is the 7 comes first in the sentence, but it's actually going to come second after our subtraction in our expression. And a number comes second in the sentence, it's going to come first in our expression. So we have 7 less than a number, and that's going to translate into x minus 7. So less than means subtraction, but it's switching the order around so that we're taking the 7 away from whatever came second, which in this case is the x. Okay? Example 5. The product of 9 and 5 more than a number. Now first of all, product means multiplication. So this is a multiplication problem. You could use a little times sign, a little x for multiplication, but in higher mathematics we typically use just a dot. When you see this sentence or this phrase, you want to kind of look for that keyword and, because that's going to tell you exactly where to put that multiplication symbol, that little dot. So whatever comes before the word and is going to come in front of your dot. So in this case, that's the number 9. And whatever comes after the word and, which in this problem is this whole phrase, that's going to come after the dot. So how do you translate 5 more than a number? Well, more than means you're adding to. So we want to add 5 more, 5 added to our number x. Now we're almost done. The only problem with this is we want the product of 9 and all of this stuff. So it would be incorrect to write our answer the way I have it written so far, because we want 9 times all of the 5 plus x. So you have to wrap that in parentheses so that you take 9 times that whole quantity. Now you can leave your answer like that, or again in mathematics, we sometimes will leave out that little dot and just push these closer together. So an acceptable answer would also be 9 parentheses 5 plus x. Okay. Example 6, 3 less than the product of a number and 6. Now this has lots of little pieces to it, so we want to make sure that we kind of break it up into a more manageable problem. The first thing that I see is this phrase less than. And remember that one, just like in example number 4, means subtraction. So there's subtraction going on in this problem. But it also causes us to switch the order around, because the phrase less than means subtract but switch your order. So what we want to do next here is take this number 3, which came in front of the phrase less than, and it's actually going to come after our subtraction symbol. There's that switch of order. Whatever comes after the phrase less than is going to go in front of our subtraction. Now, this phrase that comes after the word less than is a whole expression in and of itself. So the product of a number and 6, well, product means multiply. And what are the two things that we're multiplying? Look for that word and. The word that comes in front of that word and is our number, which is x. And the word or number that comes after the word and is 6. So we want to multiply x and 6. So x times 6 minus 3. So 3 less than the product of a number and 6 becomes x times 6 minus 3. Now that's mathematically correct, but it's not as clean as we usually would write it. So x times 6 typically would be written as 6x. We usually like to put our numbers or our coefficients in front of our variables. It just makes it look a little bit cleaner. So the correct answer here in a little bit better form would be 6x minus 3. Okay, so down here at the bottom, just as a reminder, subtracted from and less than are those two key phrases that you want to remember, imply that you switch the order around when translating. Otherwise, you're just going to read your sentence from left to right and translate as well from left to right, except in these two special examples of subtracted from and less than. Okay, let's try a few more examples. This time we're going to translate equations instead of expressions. Remember that equations have equal signs in them, expressions do not. So in example 7, we have a number minus 3 equals 1. There's no phrase subtracted from or less than in that problem, so we're just going to translate from left to right. So a number becomes x, minus becomes subtraction, 3 stays 3, equals becomes equals, and 1 is 1. So our answer, x minus 3 equals 1. Okay, example 8. The product of a number and 3 is 6. So going left to right, we have a product. Product means multiplication. What are the two things we're multiplying? Look for that word and. Whatever comes before it comes first in front of your multiplication. So here a number becomes our x. Whatever comes after the word and, which in this case is 3, comes after the multiplication. The word is translates into an equal sign, and 6 stays 6. So we get x times 3 equals 6. There's nothing wrong with that answer, but if we want a little bit cleaner, sharper answer, we would probably want to put the 3 in front of the x, so we could write this as 3x equals 6. Okay? Example 9. 12 divided by a number equals 1/3 times that number. So again, we're just going to go left to right. 12 becomes 12. Divided by is your division symbol. A number becomes x. Equals is equals. 1/3 is 1/3. Times becomes multiplication, and that number is our x again. So we get 12 divided by x equals 1/3 times x. That's a totally acceptable answer. As an alternative, remember division could also be thought of as a fraction, so you could see this left-hand side also written as 12 over x equals 1/3 x. Both answers are correct. Okay? In the next examples here, what I want to point out is the difference between just one little tiny word and how it makes a big difference in how you translate. These two sentences here are exactly the same, except in the first example we see this little word is. So 3 is less than the product of a number and 6. And in the second example, there is no word is. It just is 3 less than the product of a number and 6. So what's the difference between these two examples? When you translate, there's a huge difference in what they turn into. Now we've actually already done this second example. When you see that phrase less than, remember that's subtraction, and it switches the order around. So the 3, which came first in words, comes second in symbols. And the product of a number and 6 came second, so it's going to come first in front of that subtraction. Product means multiply. A number would be x. 6 is 6. And when we clean this up, it became 6x minus 3. So this answer is 6x minus 3. Less than became subtraction. In the first example, in the first sentence up above, when we throw in that little tiny word is, it totally changes the problem, because instead of having an expression for an answer, which we got down here with 6x minus 3, is less than is actually an inequality. So is less than is the less than symbol. So going left to right, 3 stays 3. Is less than becomes the less than inequality. And the product of a number and 6, there's that 6 times x again. So the answer to this first sentence is 3 less than 6x. So totally different solutions. The second one here is called an expression. The first one up here is called an inequality. So when you see the word is, that's an important thing to look for, because it changes your answer from an expression to either an equation or an inequality. So the word is by itself just becomes an equal sign. Is less than becomes the less than inequality. Is less than or equal to becomes less than or equal to inequality. Is greater than is the greater than symbol, and is greater than or equal to is the greater than or equal to symbol. Now if you just saw less than without the word is, then that just becomes subtraction. Okay? For our last example here, we're going to not only translate this sentence, but then we're going to simplify it and combine any like terms that we might have. Okay, so it's a big sentence, so we want to kind of break it up into pieces and look for those keywords. It says the sum of 14 and 8 times a number is subtracted from the number multiplied by 5. So there's lots of little phrases in here. One key phrase that I see that should kind of make bells go off in your head is this phrase, subtracted from. Remember, that means to switch the order around. So we want subtraction, but whatever comes in front of that phrase, which is all of this stuff, the sum of 14 and 8 times a number, all of that is going to come after the minus sign. And whatever comes after the phrase subtracted from, which is all of this stuff, is going to come in front of the minus sign. So let's start up here in the first box. The sum of 14 and 8 times a number. So sum means addition. And look for that word and, because that's going to tell you the two things that you're adding. 14 comes before it, so 14 goes in front of the plus. 8 times a number comes after the word and 8 times a number would be 8 times x. So this is the sum of 14 and 8 times x, or 8 times a number. Okay? The second phrase that we have coming after our subtracted from is the number multiplied by 5. Well, our number is x, multiply means multiply, and 5 means 5. So the number multiplied by 5 means x times 5. Now there's a couple things wrong with this. First of all, I'm going to want to clean it up a little bit, and I also have an issue because I want to be subtracting this 14 plus 8x from 5x. So we have to be a little bit careful because we actually want to subtract all of this from all of this. So it's good to use parentheses here so that we're extra careful. The other thing I'm going to do is just clean up x times 5 and make that a 5x. And we're going to subtract from that our quantity 14 plus 8x. Now, there is the initial expression that you would get just from translating. To finish off the problem, we're also asked to simplify it and combine like terms. So when I go to combine like terms, that means I need to clean this up. And remember that if you have any parentheses in your problem, you want to eliminate them first so that you can then combine any like terms that are left over. Now the parentheses that are around this 5x actually aren't necessary because there's nothing in front of the 5x that needs to get multiplied. So I can drop those first set of parentheses. The second set of parentheses are needed because there's this minus sign in front of it, which is going to need to be distributed across before I can do anything else. So let's use that distributive property. Negative, which is like a negative 1 times 14 is minus 14, and a negative times positive 8x becomes negative 8x. So here we've eliminated all of our parentheses. Now we're ready to combine any like terms that we see, and I see a 5x and a negative 8x. So 5x minus 8x is like 5 minus 8, that's negative 3, and the variable part, or the x, stays the same. So 5x minus 8x is negative 3x. And then this minus 14, which didn't have an x, stays unchanged in the problem. So I'm just going to bring it down. And here's my final answer. Negative 3x minus 14 is the simplified answer. Okay, that ends our notes on translating words into expressions and equations. Good luck.